I am so excited about this episode because we are joined by David Kadavy. He is an author and a creative human who's exploring how to make something even when you don't know what you're making, how to get the courage to do things that might not work, and how to find the one thing that only you can do for the world. He was an advisor to Timeful, an AI-powered calendar app built upon his mind management principles that was bought by Google in 2015. He's sold more than 100,000 books in 13 languages, including Mind Management, Not Time Management, The Heart to Start, and his new book coming out, Finish What Matters. David, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Okay, thank you for having me. It's an honor. I'm excited to be here.
I am so excited. So I discovered you on Instagram through some of your crazy videos of basically just rants. Some of them are rants, but like really great
What,
rants.
really? What rants? What do you mean?
I mean,
I didn't know I was coming off in that way.
no, it was awesome. My first video of you that I found was when it was all about you telling people to not write a book.
Yeah.
My introduction to you was you yelling at people to not write a book, and I just loved it. So, and people have a dream of writing a book, right? Like you are a creator. Why tell people to not write a book?
You know, I don't know where that came from. No, I'm in the middle of writing a book. I'm not in the middle. I'm like 98% done with writing a book right now. And it's been a very long project. And I've been writing books for 15 years now. And so I'm in that really, I've been that part of the project where you have invested everything and gained nothing. And so I've been that difficult time where you're like, okay, is this even going to be worth having done? And when I do reflect on, boy, I've this book that I'm writing right now, Finish What Matters, the one that's about to come out. This is also the end of a 10-year project, a 3-book series, the Getting Art Done series, which just began with like a 30-day email challenge. I was going to write a chapter every day for 30 days. And here I am 10 years later finishing this. And it's just like realizing I'm 10 years older and all this stuff. And so, yeah, I made a video just saying, do not write a book because it is the most amount of work for the least amount of money ever. And you never get better at it. I mean, playing a bit of a character there is that
Of course.
I've never enjoyed it. I have never gotten better at it. I've blown out my entire life to write books. These are all things that have some truth to them, but you know, the way reels are, it's not a medium that you go on there and you kind of like talk about a lot of nuance. So there was an emotional truth to this "do not write a book" reel, and it has definitely resonated with people, which
Yeah.
is exciting. That's how you and I met, and so for that, it's already worth it.
Yeah, it was awesome, and I think it resonates so much because I think anyone that is writing a book or writes anything, writers feel so similarly about the writing process, right? It's like
Mhm.
that quote when authors say, "I wanna have written the book, I don't wanna write the book." I think about that all the time because but you can't not do it. If somebody has an idea in their brain and they have to get it out and the book is the medium they choose, you have to write, you have to do it no matter how hard or difficult it is, you just keep doing it.
And that's the upshot of the whole thing is there are people on there, well, what, they're like, I'm a little, you wrote these books about how I should do things. And like, now you're telling me this. And I'm like, well, I mean, if you don't have any choice, you're going to do it anyway. Like,
Absolutely.
that's what I'm doing.
Yes.
I'm not quitting.
Yeah, I love it. I think that was a great introduction to you, and then I got to learn a little bit more about you. You are a full-time creative, and this is what you do. You're an author, you had a podcast. You've been in this world for such a long time. If someone asks you, how would you describe your body of work?
Uh, Avoiding being a real artist by creating books about how to make art, I guess, is where I'm at right now with it. Is as I reflect on these 10 years and I look at this thing like writing these 3 books, one of the things that hits with me is like, Man, I like wanted to be an artist. I wanted to draw. I didn't even like writing. I
Really?
didn't like writing growing up. I became a writer by accident. And so like that's one of the things realizing now is like after now that I've learned all the things that I'm learning in this book, I'm like, well, should I have even written these 3 books? But the catch is I couldn't have learned the things without writing the books. So I write the books for myself. And so now I'm like, that's been a process of like trying to give myself the courage and trying to give myself the tools for figuring out how to express the things that build up inside us that come out as art eventually if we give them the chance to. And so that's where I'm at right now is like, as I'm finishing this series, I'm thinking about, all right, now I need to figure out how to get deeper and more personal and do more personal and more artistic work to the point that while writing this book, Finish What Matters, that word matters really uh, stuck with me. And it kind of haunted me for a bit is like, okay, I'm writing a book about finishing stuff. And when I started writing the book, I thought, well, this will be easy. I've finished lots of things. I've finished hundreds of podcast episodes and hundreds of my weekly newsletter, Love Mondays, and written several books. I know how to finish things. For once, finally, this is a book I already know. I'm already an expert on this. And it turned out that I had a lot of stuff to learn. And that was the word that really stuck with me is matters. Like, oh, is this what matters to
Mm.
me? Like, in some sense, it does. But I've been trying to get deeper and deeper and more artistic lately. And so that did set me off on sort of a bunch of different side things where, I started doing bird photography and started drawing again. And I actually just recently published a novella under my pen name, my secret pen name. And that's in part because that word haunted me. And
Do we
it
get
made
to
me
know
realize
what it is? What's your secret pen name?
I, I just not really, it's a secret
David.
pen name still.
Well, now I want to know the novella.
Well, I mean, and this is, I think, part of maybe like I'm so scared to share it because it's so personal, and I've learned a lot writing these books, but I've also realized that's a really precious thing when you find some outlet where you are comfortable being creative in a way that you can't necessarily explain yourself. You don't want to. Art is, I think, or art is a type of process where you make something and then somebody asks you to explain it and you come up with some stuff, but maybe it's better if you don't, you know? And so I kind of like that anonymity right now of having this secret pen name that I'm writing under. And I've got no readers. I've got pretty much no readers, but I'm writing the stuff and putting it out there, and it's very therapeutic for me. And so, yeah, maybe I'm just a confused artist if I were to summarize my work as an artist who's very scared to be an artist, and as a result has created some art to help me create more art.
You created more art with this novella, and you have people who obviously appreciate your work as an artist, as an author who is a thinker and shares all these ideas that really supports people in making something that matters. And then you made something that matters and you don't want to give. We want to read what you put out into the world. Do you like that? So it's just it's interesting to me, and I totally get it. Like when I started exploring poetry more, I never thought I would share it. I'm like, I'm
Yeah,
not
yeah.
sharing this. It's poems. That's just not. I'm not willing to kind of share those pieces of me. But then I started to, and it was just interesting to see. So I'm curious, are you going to write another novella? And one day, are you going to share that and let us know that it's you?
I mean, I think that it'll probably, yeah, I'll probably share it at some point. It's just that right now I'm like I'm enjoying not having to explain what it is or not understanding necessarily what it is myself. Is that this thing came out of me very naturally. And it's not necessarily like these are two different worlds. Like whatever it was that I created, I'm not even sure who it's for. And I know that there's a lot of elements of it that would be very, I feel like there's a lot of elements of it that would be confusing or that I wouldn't want to try to explain to anybody, because I don't understand them myself. And I think that's that art can be very pure in that way. And so if this pen name gets readers at some point, I think if anybody discovered that pen name, they would be able to figure out it was me. But going in the other direction, I think it's a little bit more difficult to figure that out, which I'm cool with for now. Like, I don't think it'd be the end of the world, but I'm enjoying that anonymity, and I'm enjoying just again being in that space where I don't have to explain it, because I've been writing this nonfiction uh, for 15 years. I've been writing since my first book, and one of the refreshing things about writing fiction I have found has been to there's no pressure to be correct. There's no pressure to be right. And that's that's while that's a fun thing about nonfiction is trying to figure out something that's close to the truth and figure out how to express that. And like that's hard labor. Uh, and I think I like what it does to my brain. Um, but it's also nice to just be like pure, um, just whatever comes out and no judgments about it, and not have to worry about anybody judging me or even perceiving that people are judging me, which, like part of learning how to put art out there is like being okay with being judged, right? Um, there's an element of that, yes, but also, yeah, I think the purpose that it's serving for me right now is more personal and therapeutic, than having readers for it, really.
Well, I love that because I think
But what's the name of the podcast? It's
create for no
create for no
reason.
reason, right? It's like
Yeah.
I've just launched this book, and I have 3 sales, and one of them is me.
The no
So
That's for the
the
novella.
novella, yeah, the novella. No,
Okay.
if that was this book, I would that would be a serious problem.
Yeah, I'm like, "Wait." Okay, so all right, well then,
I've
yeah, I
already
love
sold more
that.
than 3 of these.
I know,
Just
I
type it
was
out
gonna
there.
say because I went on and I went on your website, it sold out the pre
The
like you did
preview
like
edition, yeah, yeah.
yeah, the preview edition. So, all right, I do love that. I think that's important. And I think that's important for people to hear too, because I know a lot of people that whether it's like painting or art or music or whatever, and that's the fun of it. Like the fun of it is the creative process, like creating it and not really knowing where it's going to go. And maybe you'll keep it for you forever. And maybe one day you'll put out into the world. But as long as it's doing its purpose of for you the way that you feel and like if it's something that you think matters for you, that's what's so beautiful about creating that I feel like a lot
Yeah,
of people miss, especially in today's world. I mean, you write about productivity. In today's world, it feels like we have to always be productive and producing things and getting it out and making money. And I'm like, why can't you just have a passion that you love and you just love it?
yeah. I mean, I would like to get paid for the stuff that I do because, there's that Walt Disney quote, we don't make movies to make money, we make money to make more movies. And so I think that's like the purpose really of making money for anything that I do. I think for me, I think another lesson from this also is just the power of pseudonyms, which is something that I thought was going to be more central to the book that's coming up. But it is something that I do encourage people to try is a pseudonym. Our art is so personal. And when you make a pseudonym and you put something out there under some alter ego, it helps separate you from the work a little bit. It helps separate any fear of judgment or criticism from the work. But also, I have found it's also because the person who created the work might be a different person from who you are in your day to day. It's just sort of some section of you. And there's been a lot of artists that have pen names. Richard Bachman. Stephen King was Richard Bachman for a while, secretly. until people figured it out. Marcel Duchamp had at least one alter ego of somebody was, yeah, there's so many, it's almost useless to use examples because there's so many of them. But then so many people, when they try to create something and you say to them, oh, do a pseudonym, do a pen name, it's like, oh, no, I want it to be connected to my thing. Well, it doesn't always have to be. There's people like Jason Pargin, who he's a reel creator that a video reel creator that I really admire. And he is also a novelist, but he wrote his first novel, John Dies at the End, under the name David Wong when he was like working in data entry. And then it became a hit. And like now his name is on the cover. So you can always like change it to your name. But I think that you can have like a more pure experience of expressing yourself if you're doing it under this alter ego.
Yeah. And it's cool. It's a cool story. I was looking through your blog. You're a very interesting thinker, but you also have a lot of data that backs things up as far as like different people, and you pull from a lot of different resources to make your points about art and creativity and the process and just whatever idea you're exploring, which I think is so cool. So I was wondering about your creative process. How do you decide what you're going to write about, whether it's your newsletter, a blog post, or the books? How do you decide what you're going to write about? And then how long does it take you to do all that research and actually create any of those pieces?
Well, a lot of the research kind of happens. I think that I thought that writing worked in this way where you have an idea and then you start writing about that thing. And then you're like, well, I need an example of something that does this. And then you go out and find an example of that. And that can be very difficult when you're trying to make a point with stories. Like if you want to make a point about pseudonyms, for example. Okay, yeah, you could go on Wikipedia and you would find a bunch of pseudonyms on there or pen names or something. But the way that I do some of that type of thing where it's like, okay, I've got a question I want to answer and I'm going to research it. But a lot of it is just like randomly stumbling across something like that Stephen King was secretly Richard Bachman for a while, and then just getting fascinated with that thing. And then, buying the Bachman books and then reading the story about it and then reading the news articles about it and stuff. And then, taking notes. One of my books is called Digital Zettelkasten, and it's about a obscure note-taking method with a German name that basically means a box full of paper. And so when I read a book, I will take notes and just put it in my Zettelkasten. And when I'm doing that, I'm kind of thinking about what it might be like if I were to write about that thing in the future and taking notes in my own words. And then it just sits in my database of notes for a long time. And then one day when I say, oh, I'm writing about this thing, I want to write about the Stephen King being Richard Bachman. Well, first of all, I already know that pretty well because I've taken notes about it. But if I'm like stuck on some part or any key details, like, oh, how many years or how many books was or how many sales do these books have, I can just pull up my notes and there they are. So it's almost like in New York City, there's all these water towers on the top of the buildings. And I guess that's because it's requires so much energy to like just pump water like up from the street up to people's faucets, like every time they open a faucet or take a shower or whatever. So it's much more efficient to just like pump a bunch of water up to a water tower. And then when somebody opens a faucet, then it can flow down. Right. And so it's creating this database of notes that you can refer to at any time. And you're accumulating that just always by following your curiosity, following whatever it is that's interesting to you, which is a lot of fun and is very exciting and also makes it seem a little bit less pointless, is that you don't know right now what this thing is going to be useful for, but you have a sense that there's going to be some use for it in the future. And as much as we want to create for no reason, uh, you know, sometimes it's hard to motivate yourself to do something when there isn't a clear goal of
Mhm.
how it's going to be used in the future. Um, and I think that's a useful, I find that useful just to keep myself motivated, uh, to make it seem worth it to be curious. And I think that my work is better because of it.
Yeah, that makes sense. And yeah, create for no reason is, I mean, that's that double meaning, right? Create for no reason, but also there's a huge meaning. It could be just because it brings you joy, just because it's fun for you and you love it. Or it could be because it's your business. I mean, you are a full-time creator, so this is what you do for a living, which I know is a lot of people, a lot of people would love to get to that place where they're able to do that. I find that a lot of people that have some type of passion, we live in a world now where you can monetize your passion, right? You can start a podcast, you can write books, you can do all of these things, but you have to choose. And I think a lot of people have a challenge coming up with what is the thing that I'm going to do, and then how long do I need to stick with it? It's almost like, what are the expectations that people have around being able to be a full-time creator? Like for you, like you have been doing this for such a long time. So share your experience and what that looked like, because it can be challenging. And I think that a lot of people don't really know the work that's involved in being able to do this for a living.
Yeah. Um, Maybe I'll start with something that's kind of like the main dichotomy or spectrum that I'm talking about in the book that's coming up, which is, are you a Leonardo or are you a Raphael? So Leonardo da Vinci almost never finished anything. We have maybe a dozen finished paintings from Leonardo da Vinci. Raphael finished a lot of stuff. He was incredibly prolific. But Raphael was able to be so productive because of Leonardo. Because of a lot of painters, if you're going to pick one, it would be Leonardo da Vinci. Because Leonardo da Vinci was fascinated with every little aspect of the universe. And he put all of that into the Mona Lisa. Some people think that he was distracted by science. No, science was the thing that was informing his painting. Is that the Mona Lisa's got elements of psychology and anatomy and geology and fluid dynamics. And that was like kind of his experimental playground, which, by the way, he never finished and never got paid for. It's finished enough, but he never finished it. He spent 15 years tinkering with this thing. Um, and so I think that the challenge is to kind of balance your Leonardo with your Raphael. Is that, are you exploring things, not really knowing exactly where they're taking you because there is something that you might discover? Or are you taking the things that you've learned from that and executing on some kind of plan so that you can actually put that thing out into the world and have a chance for to count and have a chance to earn the right to do it again, earn the money, the space, the whatever it is that you need to do it again. And so for myself, the way that that looked was understanding from the beginning that if you want to be creative, you do not have control over whether or not that is going to be successful financially. There's this great quote from Liz Gilbert. She says that yelling at your creativity, saying you must earn money for me, is sort of like yelling at a cat. Like, it doesn't understand what you're saying, and you're really just going to scare it away. And so that is difficult for us to sit with because we are brought up in this world where plans are laid out for us, things are measured, that if you follow these steps, you're going to achieve this result and you're going to get this reward. I mean, that's how school works. That's how work works a lot of the times, KPIs, and here's what the standardized test is going to have and all these things. But those things only exist because somebody tinkered, because somebody experimented, because somebody created for no reason because somebody was exploring and discovered something and said, well, wait, maybe if I, like Alexander Fleming with uh, discovering antibiotics, he's had some experimental petri dishes going and some of them got contaminated. Like, wait, why is the staph bacteria like not in this area where this mold is? And that's how we got antibiotics. These sort of accidental things, the things that they don't necessarily come right at the moment that you need them, but you have to kind of be looking out for them all the time. So moving forward with that understanding that you cannot decide ahead of time that something is going to succeed. So for me, that looks like using what professional investors call the barbell strategy. Have you ever heard of the barbell strategy before?
I don't think so.
Okay, yeah. So it's this idea of imagine a barbell. There's weights on each side, and in the middle, there's just the bar. Okay, so in an investing context, don't take investment advice from me because I'm not a finance expert, but most people say like, oh, well, you should just put your money in the S&P 500 and earn 7% a year or whatever. And then, in 40 years, you'll have earned a certain amount of money or whatever. And that works fine for some people, depends upon your strategy, I think. But what people miss is one, you're sort of limiting your upside, but two, you can lose a lot more than you expect because the whole market can go down like 50% quite quickly. And then it has to double again before you get back to like where you were. So when investors use the barbell strategy, what they'll do is they'll take a certain amount of their assets and they'll put them in something that like won't lose money. So that can be an investing context. That'd be like gold or bonds, or I heard about some guy who just had like a room full of nickels because the nickel in the nickels will always be worth a nickel, at least. Like, I don't think they're all still
Gosh.
nickel, but there are nickels that are made of nickel, right? So
Mhm.
like if it's legal tender, you can spend it for a nickel, but if there's so much inflation that the nickel's worth nothing, then the nickel is worth a nickel because it was worth a nickel at some point. And precious metals, whatever, right? So just like don't lose the money. Like you're not going to lose the money. It won't go down 50% like the S&P 500, or it's unlikely to, right? This is
Mhm.
challenge. You need to be like a real whiz to figure this out in an investing context, right? But then the other side is they'll make people put 15% and they'll just be like, all right, I'll like buy some crypto with this or this small cap or this weird startup or, like these things that like, I'm probably throwing away my money, but maybe it'll go up 100, 1000x. And so not only is it a little bit more fun, you can actually end up making more money that way. And most importantly, like you're protecting your downside. And so
Mm.
for me, when I started on my own, 2008 or 2007, I like made this drawing that's going to be shared in my book. Basically, that I would like freelance a little bit and then like build some passive revenue stuff. And then I had what I called speculative time. And that was like a little bit of time, like whatever time I can free up, I'm just going to like work on wacky stuff that I'm not quite sure where it's going to go, but I'm interested in it and I'm curious about it and I'm excited about it and I feel motivated to work on it. Right. And that's the stuff. It's the sure bets, wild cards, either side of your barbell. The sure bets are the things that like you're going to pretty sure it's going to work out. Like you're going to be able to pay your bills and stuff. And the wild cards are, and maybe you've got, maybe you're a teacher and you got the whole summer off, or maybe you're a retiree and you have a certain amount of money that you've got all the time in the world or whatever. Or maybe you only have an hour every Saturday. And so you're just like setting aside for your hour, just like do wacky ideas because the ideas that are, okay. So I feel like I've gone I've talked a very long time about one question, but
I know you're
I could
taking us
keep going
down.
because I wrote a whole book about this stuff, right?
I know you're taking us through the whole thing. Now we're learning
Through
how
the
to
whole
figure all
book.
this out.
Yeah, yeah. So anyway, yeah, just like I'll just start with that. It's just that you have to embrace this. You have to understand the idea that like it's not up to you whether it's whether you're creative stuff is going to succeed or not. And actually, to some extent, the more you make compromises to ensure that it will succeed, the more you limit your potential, I'll say. Um,
Ooh.
yeah,
Okay, two things. One, when you said success, okay, I have two questions. The first one is if someone's starting something new, they are following their curiosity and they're putting something out. How do you measure success? And how can someone just starting out maybe redefine success and how it looks with a creative project that is not just, I'm making money off of this?
yeah. I mean, it's a mix. And so I feel like my career might be a good example is that 2007, when my first day of self-employment, I woke up, I'm lying in bed and I'm staring at the ceiling and I'm like, all I know is that I don't have a job and I'm not going to look for one. And I don't ever want to work for anybody again. And so I thought to myself, and I had a little bit of money that I had decided I would set aside to experiment with, I gave myself a year, actually. So what I decided on was, well, there's Guitar Hero down the hallway. I could get up and go play Guitar Hero, or I could try to find something that is more fun and interesting than that. And that would have a much better chance of resulting in something that's somehow financially sustainable so that it's something that I can go and do again. So that became my definition of success is how curious am I about this thing? I was burnt out at that point, and so I, for myself, I told myself, remember when you were a kid and you were alone in your room and like hours would just melt by because you were like playing with magnets or like drawing dinosaurs or whatever it was you were doing, like time would just melt by. If you're one of those people who had that experience, I know I did. My definition of success was just, does it feel like that?
Mm,
Does it feel like that? And if it's not feeling like that for too long, let's figure out how to get back to that feeling. Because that's the feeling that's going to motivate you, that's going to get you to be able to keep um, working on the thing. Uh, and you can find, you come across these discoveries that you couldn't possibly have foreseen. This is during that time for myself. I don't know if you've ever seen the Steve Jobs Stanford commencement address.
mhm.
I watched that thing over and over again because he's got this thing where he's talking about how he dropped out of college and he dropped in on the calligraphy class and there was no point to it whatsoever, but he just fell in love with calligraphy and he built that into the first Mac. And so that was the first time that computers had really beautiful typography, optical spacing, and all these typographic controls that computers didn't have until then. And then Windows copied Mac, and so then no computers would have it if it wasn't for the fact that he dropped in on that calligraphy class, or that's the story anyway. And so this idea of you can't connect the dots moving forward, you can only connect them moving in reverse, right? And so that's how you collect those dots is by following these different things you're curious about, where you're like, this feels like a total waste of time, but can hardly control myself going forward with this thing. But what I found in my experience, at least, is that you end up collecting those dots and they sort of converge. And then suddenly you're in this space where like nobody can catch you because nobody is that obsessed with this thing and this other thing
Yeah.
that you just through your own intellectual fingerprint ended up following. Now, is that going to be an instant hit? That's who knows? That's not really up to you. But you can at least find yourself in a unique place in that way.
Yeah, I find that all the time, especially like the older that I get, all the different things that I have been curious about. I quote that Steve Jobs all the time because it's so true and it makes so much sense. I was like, I had no idea that 10 years ago I would have taken this or learned that and now I'm actually applying it or I just have that knowledge to be able to move a project forward in a unique way. And it's the coolest feeling I love your thoughts on curiosity because it's always like, if you're curious about it, there's a reason. There is a reason why you are particularly curious about a topic or you want to read something. Or what I find challenging is I want to read so many books, and there's obviously not enough time to read all the books. And I've also gotten more I've been reading nonfiction and personal development books my whole life, right? Since I was in
Okay.
my 20s. So I'm now at a new place where I used to think fiction books were a waste of time.
I
And
did too.
now, really? I think that's interesting because people that are very growth minded, it's like I almost felt like if I was reading something, I had to be learning, growing, discovering something new. Now I'm really getting more into fiction books because it's just a story. And I also love writing. I've read a ton of books about writing and the writing process, and I learned about that. So now, once you learn about the writing process, you can never read books the same way because now I'm like, oh, why did they choose this word? Why did they format it in this way? But I find it interesting with books and how do you choose if you have so many things that you're curious about, how do you choose which books and how do you decide what book to read?
Two things here. Yeah. All right. So first of all, the whole like you have so many books that you want to read. There's so many Wikipedia pages you want to browse through. There's so many articles that um building up. I have this thing that I call curiosity management that I've dabbled with. And the whole question, like the guiding North Star of curiosity management is, can I match my level of engagement with this idea with my actual level of curiosity about it? Because I feel like curiosity, like for me, it can come from almost like an insecure place. Like I've just got to keep collecting information. I have to keep reading books to be like a worthy person. I feel less like that than maybe I used to, but I think it's still there and it still does drive some of the urge or curiosity to read all the books, right? Is that now when I get excited about something, I'll stop and ask myself, like, or well, how curious am I about this? Like, maybe I'll go read a summary of this book first, or maybe I'll like talk to an LLM about it for a little bit and just like, what are my questions here? Or I will, or I'll even like have a list where every time I'm curious about a new thing and I feel an urge to like go look up a Wikipedia page or something, I'll just put it on that list. And I call that my crumb time list, which is that we have this crumb time. There's all these like little bits of time, like you're waiting for a friend at the restaurant or you're waiting at the dentist in the waiting room. And you don't know how long you have, but you might have 20 minutes and you might have two. And so we naturally just gravitate towards, well, let's just open up social media or open up our email or just find like these sort of things that we can do that like make us feel like we're doing something, but it's not necessarily that productive. And so with that crumb time list, then you can say like, oh, okay, the Bader-Meinhof phenomenon, I want to find out more about that. So I'll just look up the Wikipedia page quick and browse that like, okay, all right, and I've got a general idea what that, then like maybe there'll be a thing that jumps out at me that makes me say like, oh, wow, I need to go deeper on that. And I'll like put that on the list. But maybe I've got 2 minutes, maybe I've got 20. And I close it off and then like, oh, am I still curious about that thing? I don't know. Like maybe it gets to the point where I want to read a book about it. And then I might be more intentional about what book do I choose for that. It's like download the Kindle samples for all of them and read the first few pages of the Kindle samples for all of them. And, maybe I'm into it. Maybe I'm not. And I've found that just asking myself that question, like, can I match my level of engagement with the idea with my actual level of curiosity with it? I find a lot more freeing. Like, I feel like I'm able to then engage with a lot of different things that I'm curious about at like a more superficial level. And maybe I'll have things where I'm like, all right, well, maybe in the future, like when I'm done with this project or that project, maybe I'll work on that. I've even done stuff where I'll like, maybe I'll get a book that I really am curious about, but it's not really, maybe I'm busy with a book. Maybe I'm busy writing a book, right? And so I'll like set a reminder for myself. Okay, 6 months from now, because then you leave it on the coffee table because you're like, well, it's an open loop. Like you want to engage with it, but you know you're not going to do it now, but you also don't want to forget. So I'll just like set like a little reminder for myself. I'll shelve the book because I know like once it's on the shelf, I'm not going to go hunting for it. But I'll set a reminder for myself months from now, reconsider picking up that book. And I've
Oh, I
done
like
that.
that.
And it's funny because I ended up usually, I guess one of the times I did end up picking the book back up. But part of it is a little bit of a trick to yourself. Is just like, it's sort of like when my mom we used to go to the toy store or whatever, or be at Kmart, and I'd be like, I want this toy. Like, well, okay, wait 3 weeks. And if you still want the toy, then you can have it or whatever. Then you forget.
Yeah.
And so you do that to yourself. You just say like, "Oh, I've set a reminder for myself, so I'm definitely not going to forget about it now." And then you do get the reminder like, "Oh yeah, I'm not interested right now." So that's one thing. Then the next is the fiction, but if you have a response to that.
Well, no, I was curious if there was a book that you did that with and you found it to be such a great book and you wish that you would have read it sooner or that or it did make an impact in your life?
I haven't done it that many times. No, it's really been like a 5 minute writing prompt book. And then another one was Leonardo da Vinci's treatise on painting, like his actual official reconstructed one. Um, that was one where I had to dig deep into Leonardo da Vinci and Raphael. I even traveled to Italy for a research trip for this book,
Wow.
to really like get into those and learn. I'm like, I could have probably earned a PhD for how deeply I got into that to make that the main thread of the book. But I was to the point where I felt like I could move forward with writing the book, given what I had already learned. But I still was very curious about digging deeper to it. But I didn't feel like I had the energy or the time, that it would be better spent somewhere else. And so I set that reminder for myself. And I did end up revisiting that book. I feel like you have to be that way about the things that you follow that you're curious about too. It's like, yeah, maybe you're not going to let your curiosity take over your entire life so that you forget to bathe and feed your pets and stuff and all your plants die. But, maybe you're able to box out a Saturday morning or an hour a day or 20 minutes a day or one day a month or whatever. And like, that's the time when you are like letting your mind wander about those things that you're curious about. That's where you discover that. It's where you get like that little bit of exposure to that potential upside,
Mhm.
that makes the barbell strategy such a cool and useful tool.
Yeah. Alright, you had one more was there one more part of the
Well, the fiction,
curiosity?
you asked me about fiction.
Yeah.
So I too thought that reading fiction was a waste of time, but I got to a point where my nonfiction books had started to become more of the sure bet side of my barbell. That some of the experimentation I had done had resulted in some books, and those books were earning revenue. And so, as things tend to happen with me, is that, oh, I want to get more artistic, more riskier, or more nonsensical, you could say. Is it like I'm doing more things for reasons that I don't know,
Mhm.
creating for no reason? But I said to myself, all right, well, this is, I call this the surround and conquer technique, which is that, all right, I said to myself, well, I would like to write some fiction. It would be nice to write some fiction. And so I sort of did a mind map of what are some of the skills that I would need to write fiction. There's writing, marketing would be an important one. It'd be nice to know something about marketing, storytelling, character development, plot structure. And you start mapping those out, and I realized, like, well, all right, writing, I can write. I can get myself to write. I can do the writing habit. I can, if I put my mind to it, I can get myself to write because I've already done that. I've written books and stuff. So I've done that. Marketing, I can do some marketing. I can get books to sell, at least in nonfiction. I'm sure it's different for fiction. I got some of that. And one of the things I realized was, oh, well, I don't really like reading fiction. And that's going to be difficult, isn't it? To get to write fiction without reading it. I mean, that doesn't seem like that's going to work. So I want to learn storytelling. I want to learn plot development, that sort of thing. So I said, well, all right, well, what sort of projects can I take on with the skills that I already have that would make it a little bit easier to just build these other skills that I would need to do this other thing. Because if I just like went straight to try to write a novel, like I feel like that'd be quite intimidating.
Mhm.
For me, at least, it would be. And so one of the things I did was, well, I'll start building more storytelling into my nonfiction. So I've done that. Like Mind Management, Not Time Management is like this whole personal story arc about how I discovered all the things that are in there. And that's me experimenting with storytelling. Um, some people don't like that structure. I do. And so that's my 1-star reviews complain about my personal stories, but the 5-star reviews also like it. So that's fine. And so I did that, but then also there was like, well, how do I get myself to read fiction? And I realized like, well, storytelling. What's related to storytelling that I already like? Movies. I like movies. Well, why don't you write a screenplay? Well, I don't want to write a screenplay. Nobody's going to read a screenplay. I want to write a novel or a novella or whatever. And so I said, well, what about movies that have been made from novels? Like you could you just take your favorite movies and then read the novels. And so I was like, all right, well, we're talking about some favorite movies. All right. I realized Shawshank Redemption and Stand By Me, two movies which are in my all-time top 5. Both of those movies are made based off of 2 Stephen King novellas. Not
Mm.
even novels, novellas. Isn't that convenient? Because I don't have to read a whole novel. I can just read novellas. Oh, by the way, they come in the same book. It's a book
Oh
called
my
Four
gosh.
Seasons, and 2 of the 4 movies are those movies. So then I went from like, oh, how do I get myself to read fiction to I cannot wait to read these novellas
Ah.
because that is going to be so cool, right? And so I did that, and then I was like, well, now I'll read the screenplays, and then I started reading books about writing screenplays, which told me other stuff about storytelling. And next thing I know, like now I'm like reading novels. I've like read other novels that were based off movies that I liked, and then I would like see, oh, that movie is based on a novel. Then I'd read the novel first, and then I watch the movie. And now I just like read novels. And so just by like, I call it surround and conquer because you're like strategically choosing these projects that are around the perimeter of
Mm.
that kind of main thing that is maybe a little intimidating or has sort of defenses around it, trying to dissolve those defenses through these other things that are maybe already a little bit more fun or you're a little bit more capable of, and then moving in on that other thing. And so, like, and now I went from that to like writing some short stories, and now a 33,000 word novella. I mean, it's almost a novel. I might expand it at some point, but I just kind of got to the point where I was like, all right, I need to just get that out there. So
It sounds like you're so strategic, but also not. Like, loosely strategic in the sense that when you speak about it, it sounds so strategic, but the way that you get there is just so fluid, which is really cool. I think that a lot of people can learn from that way of blending both of those together, exploring the curiosity, allowing things to happen, but at the same time, be noticing how to get better at your craft or a craft that you want to pursue.
yeah, I think it's a little bit like maybe riding an elephant or a horse or whatever, right? Like or some sort of wild animal. I don't really do those things. It sounds really dangerous. But you're riding this thing that wants to go somewhere else, and you're like trying to figure out how to make it seem like it's the thing's idea to go there. You can kind of do that with yourself. It's like just have this sort of curiosity about your own motivation. I think that's a major thing that we don't really get trained how to do is everything in school and work is like just do this what do the thing you do the thing, here's the steps to follow. And so when the steps aren't there and you're trying to motivate yourself to do something, like you've got to figure it out for yourself. You've got your own little motivational quirks, and so it becomes this sort of conversation with your own motivation. That kind of rhymes with where you're like trying to figure out how to trick yourself into enjoying a thing, or at least finding the most enjoyable route to getting to wherever it is you want to go.
Yeah. That reminds me of Matt Bell wrote a book called Refuse to Be Done, and it's about writing. And one of the things I love, he talks about writers that are plotters and pantsers and what's the difference between the two. And then he talks about how there's value in both. And there was like a novel that he wrote that he did not plot it out at all. And he said that novel, and it was one of his most successful books. He's like, it never would have turned out the way that it did had I structured it all out and wrote the whole outline and stuff. It was almost like he let the characters develop as you go. I love that whole idea. I mean, I see the value in both when you're, I mean, I'm talking about writing, but just in life in general, right? Some people have a very strict, this is what I need to do by this date and this time and this age and all the things. But when you're able to just kind of, I'm going to see where this goes and develop, I think there's a lot of beauty in that and allowing some things to unfold in your life that you never would have thought possible.
It's balancing that Leonardo and the Raphael. Leonardo's the
Yes.
explorer and is just like curious about various things. And then Raphael's the planner, the executor. And one can get too strong uh, in either direction. Uh, the Raphael can get too strong too. Like one of the things I learned writing this book was I realized that I didn't used to finish things. I kind of figured out how to start finishing things. And then one of the things writing this book was the whole thing of matters, but also realizing that, sometimes I can be a little stubborn about when I set a plan that I'm going to follow it and I'm going to follow through on it. Right. Is that I can look back on projects I've taken on that while you can't know ahead of time how something's going to turn out, you can at least make an estimate. And if I had made an estimate, I would have realized and then actually looked at what are the potential outcomes of this thing and how much of my resources is actually going to take and what are the other things I could do with that amount of time and energy, I probably would have decided to quit those projects, but did not. So you could get too stubborn about following through on things too, but it's a balance.
Yeah. You did quit your podcast.
I did.
And you did over 300 episodes and then you decided to quit it. So how do you decide what to quit and when to quit?
Yeah. That was a major one. And it should have quit sooner, I think.
Really?
Yeah.
Why?
Yeah, I think I should have quit sooner than I did. Well, I talk about this in the book, how I ended up going to Jeff Goins is an author. I went to his tribe conference and he stood on stage and he was like, I'm like, this is such a great conference. It's cool. I can't wait to go to more of these. And he stands on stage and goes, next year's conference is going to be the last one. And I was like, whoa. And everybody's kind of wondering what's going on. And I felt something weird. And I wasn't quite sure what. And so months went by. And then Jeff, he quit his podcast. He quit various parts of his business. And when he quit his podcast, that was when I was like, okay, I see what's going on here. I felt a little bit of envy for the guy at his ability to just quit something. Because my podcast meant so much to me. And I think it was part of that identity of okay, now I'm a Raphael. Now I finish things. So I'm just going to keep finishing things. But the thing is that when we create something, we are achieving our ideal self, our aspirational self. There's this idea, the self-discrepancy theory by the psychologist E. Torrey Higgins. He talks about the ideal self and the ought self. And the ideal self is our aspirations. It is often these artistic things that we want to create a podcast. We want to write books. We want to paint. And then there's the ought self. It's we ought to pay the bills. We ought to go to the doctor and get our checkup. We ought to do this thing that we don't really want to do for a family member or whatever. We have these expectations on us by other people in our lives, the actual and the ought. And one of the beautiful things about when you take on one of these, I call them finite or infinite projects, like a podcast, is that it could go on forever.
Yeah.
And that, somewhere in your mind, that going in, that it's not going to go on forever. You're not going to say, oh, I didn't do my last backpack video from my deathbed at 96. I'm a failure. No, but we don't tend to set some sort of finish line for us for these infinite projects. And so I hadn't set a finish line for myself. I sort of had like if I just don't, if I feel like somebody else is creating I'm trying to create the podcast that I want to hear. And if I don't feel like that anymore, someday I'll quit. But I think what started to happen was that odd self started to overtake the ideal self a little bit, or started to smother the ideal self. The obligations started to smother the aspirations a little bit. Because one of the great things about having those infinite projects is that you can set up these systems where, all right, now I've got my schedule, and now I've got boom, 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 boom. If I do these things in these steps, then I will just keep on cranking out episodes. And that's a great way to actually like achieve your ideal self, achieve your aspirations, is that you create these sort of obligations, this set of things that if you follow them, they're going to make you more like the person that you want to be. And I think that's the greatest reason to have a podcast or to read books or to write book summaries or whatever, is that yeah, maybe there's a business thing to it, but it's sort of forcing you to do something that's going to make you more of the person that you want to be at a pace that's a little bit more, probably a lot more than if you had just sort of did it whenever you felt like it. Right.
Yeah.
But then you reach this point where it becomes, well, now I've got like all these listeners, I've got some sponsors, I've got this agency that's selling ads on my behalf, I've got people who are editing the thing, I've got people who, it's not like their only thing, they're not depending on me entirely, but like there's some obligations there. And then there's also my own identity about like, I'm a person who finishes things now. And so it can be difficult sometimes to recognize when that has happened, when the obligations are overshadowing the aspirations. And so I think that's one of the things that kind of happened for me. Was I was going to start writing this book, and I didn't feel like I had the space mentally to do that. And and also like I had learned so much from my guests, which was part of the point of starting the podcast. But you reach a point of diminishing returns eventually. Like depending upon the pace that you go, like you're gonna want to go out and apply all the things you've learned, and you start to not have the space for that if you're spending 10 hours researching a different person every 2 weeks or whatever. You're thinking too much about other people's ideas at a certain point, and you're not able to take what you've learned and try to develop your own ideas. And so that's where it went for me. I miss elements of it, and I hope to do something like it. I love coming on podcasts like this because it makes me feel like I have a podcast again a little bit. So in some manner, in some form, I would like to do something like that again in the future, but I'm glad that I quit. And I wish I I could have done it sooner. I'll just say that.
Interesting. I appreciate hearing that because a lot of people are in that situation. They feel like they want to keep going, but when you lose the love of it or the benefit of why you started it and it starts feeling like I have to, it is very different. You have a different relationship with the thing that you originally created for the love of it or to have conversations, to whatever your reasoning behind it. And I think some people are really scared to quit. Some people quit way too soon. They quit sooner than they maybe should, but
Yeah.
I think it's hard for people to quit something.
And that I have to feeling is really useful sometimes. Like that's what gets you to, like I'm not likely to start reaching out to people, but if I have to, I'm going to. And I'm going to be glad that I did, because I really hate doing things that I know that I'm going to enjoy. Hard time getting myself to do things that I will enjoy. I know that about myself.
Wait, you hate doing things? What?
Every time I'm about to travel, I'm like, I don't want to go. I want to cancel the trip. All these horrible things are going to happen. I should never leave the house. But then I'm on the trip and I'm like, I should do this more often.
Yeah.
And it's the same way. It's like, I want to invite this person to my podcast. They're going to say no. And then I'm going to feel terrible and blah, blah. And then they say yes. And then you have a conversation with them. And then 3 years later, you're like emailing them, how are you? How are you? And this great relationship forms and stuff. And it's like, depending upon what little emotional quirks you have, like it can be useful to give yourself that I have to. How many of us want to go to the gym, right? And we're glad we're there. We're in the middle and we're like, yeah, okay. Or when you're done,
When
you're
you're
glad
done,
that you did it.
especially, you're like,
When you're
yes,
done,
I'm
especially like,
good.
I did it. Yeah, exactly. During it, sometimes it really sucks.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're glad that you did it.
Yeah. All right. I have one last question. I ask all of my guests the same last question, which is what's one activity that we can do in 10 minutes or less to live a more creative life?
I call this the cottage test. There is something I call the fortress fallacy, which seems to be universal, and it's certainly true for me, which is that the first iteration or the first version of any idea that comes to you is way beyond your abilities and resources. It's like you're picturing this fortress in your mind, that you're going to build this fortress and you've never built anything. And like that surrounding technique I was talking about, if you instead build a cottage, you learn all these skills that you could learn that you could apply towards building that fortress. You learn how to apply for building permits and collect materials and all that stuff. And so take some of your ideas, maybe you have a list of ideas, and I even have a spreadsheet. Fortress, cottage. Fortress is just a quick one sentence. What is the vision that you have? And then cottage is what is the uh, smallest version of that idea that you could possibly implement. I find for myself, I can really feel like a physiological response in my body when it just kind of goes from this sort of tense, like, ooh, I don't know, I can't really do that, to as soon as I write down that cottage idea, I'm like, oh, I would do that, and then I would do this and this and that. And I can see the steps in my mind, and that starts to make it feel possible. And that can sometimes be enough to inspire action.
Love that. Yes, it's the next small little thing that you can do. We overcomplicate things way too much. So I love that. I love that you have different phrases and terms for all of the things that you create. It's so cool.
I can't stop it.
I love it. It's the best. Oh my gosh, David, you're so awesome. Thank you so much. This was such a fun conversation. I'm excited to read your book. Where can people find you and get a copy of the book when it comes out?
The book I'm going to be directing people to Amazon. That will be where it will be like the main focus early on, and maybe later on it'll be in other places like my online store. But I'm not going to be selling it there to start. It'll be on Amazon, and that's coming out September 14th, I think. Finish What Matters, Make Your Creativity Count. It is the third and final book in the Getting Art Done trilogy, which has taken me 10 years.
So cool. I love it. And people can check you out on Instagram. I'll put where to find you, your website, your Instagram. People go follow David on Instagram.
See all my rants on Instagram.
All his rants. It's funny and they make you think and they make you laugh. So what's better than that? David, you're awesome. Thank you so much again for taking the time. I so appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Kate. This has been wonderful.